the Transport Minister admitted that the taxi industry is still receiving COVID relief funds. But as usual, there is a lot more money and a lot more detail to this than our media is letting on. Hey everyone, welcome back to Nick's Rambles, where I follow the money, ask the uncomfortable questions, and dig into the real stories behind some of South Africa's hottest headlines. So here's a question for you. On top of these alleged relief funds, how much more do you think the government is funneling into the taxi industry every year? Into an informal sector that's barely regulated, often violent and deeply politically connected. From provincial donations to national subsidies and mysterious development funds. I'm going to show you that both our national and provincial governments send millions to an industry that doesn't pay tax. Yet, it's an industry that feels inclined to harass and abuse the very taxpayers funding this corrupt and elusive underground government. This isn't just about taxis. It's about power, money, and a system that seems untouchable. Let's get into it. Before we move on, I would love for you to like and subscribe. Really helps my channel get out there, beats the algorithms, and obviously, if you enjoy the content, just another reason to subscribe, like, and share. So really appreciate that. Let's get into the article from Times Live, published on 23rd of April. It says, taxpayers still paying COVID relief funds to taxi industry. Transport Minister Barbara Creecy has revealed that the department is still dispersing COVID-19 relief funds to the taxi industry. It goes on to say, as of March 2023, about 56.6 thousand qualifying operating licenses on the system were still not paid. Cabinet approved an extension on August 31st, 23, to allow that 708 million to be paid out to outstanding taxi operators. In this regard, 300 million was allocated in the 24-25 financial year, and the balance of 408 has been allocated to the 25-26 financial year to allow for the conclusion of the disbursement. Mamani criticized the continued payouts to the industry. Bosa finds it unacceptable that public funds continue to flow to a sector without clear transparency, accountability, or evidence of need, especially as essential public services such as education and healthcare remain underfunded. I would go on to say that I completely agree with this. We have hundreds of thousands of doctors, and we are in desperate need of teachers. An article published by Makwena from Tshwane University of Technology, which is where I went, is very insightful, and I'll leave a link of this in the description. But I want to point out a couple of things. The taxi industry originated during apartheid, taking root in the late 1970s. Initially, this industry was regulated. However, after deregulation in 1987, there was a surge of new minibus taxi operators keen to profit, which ultimately contributed to today's highly profitable, multi-billion rand industry that serves over 60% of South Africa's commuting population. With this growing competition, commuters gravitate towards services that best suit their preferences and safety, which are influenced not only by service quality, but also by operational differences between transport modes. An instance of this is the reliability of our trains. Therefore, you'd be more likely to take a taxi because it has a more operational reliability. A significant driver of violence in South Africa's minibus taxi industry is the lack of effective regulation. So it was regulated, then it was deregulated, and to this day, since 1987, a significant driver of violence is the issue of regulation with taxis. So we haven't made any progress to date on that since 1987. It's a really interesting report, well done. So I want to refer to the misuse of power, because essentially this is about the money that the government is giving to the taxi industry. So the pervasiveness of violence within the taxi industry has created a culture of fear and insecurity among citizens who rely on public transportation daily. Intra-industry conflicts are frequently fueled by disputes over leadership roles in taxi associations and the bucket system, an unregulated method of collecting money which often lacks transparency and accountability. It sounds like the ANC. At ranks and stops, these tensions can result in confrontations between drivers. The misuse of power extends beyond the industry players to certain officials within licensing and transport authorities. The prevalence of corruption and power misuse within the taxi industry, both by industry participants and law enforcement officials, has perpetuated a culture of impunity, which we're all very familiar with. Corruption extends beyond the police, with some politicians also holding interests in taxi businesses, leading to a complex conflict of interests and contributing to inefficiency of law enforcement in handling taxi violence. So, our politicians financially benefit from the violence of the taxi industry, and the only people suffering are the poor. The current National Land Transport Act lacks provision for direct oversight of taxi associations. Funny, because almost every other act is very well implemented on anyone who so much as wants to earn a decent living. It allows the taxis to operate independently and establish control over routes without regulatory guidance. Our government wants to take away all the rights of our security industry. We have less cops now than we did 10 years ago, and I think our population has tripled. And we have a lawless taxi industry that acts with absolute impunity. And the current National Land Transport Act lacks provisions for direct oversight of taxi associations, allowing them to operate independently and establish control over routes without regulatory guidance. Very interesting that that's an act that the government doesn't want to look at. The one that probably kills and affects so many poor people unnecessarily. And now we're giving them COVID relief funds, and we're giving them, guess what the number is? 500 million rand a year goes to the taxi industry from the Department of Transport and all of our provinces, which I'll show you soon. Because the taxi industry operates largely outside government regulation, because everything else is inside government regulation, it is challenging for authorities to implement policies that would address the sector's systematic violence. And I will add to that, at the cost of the poor. The financials for our provinces paying money to various taxi councils and industries looks like this. So Northwest, this is Northwest's annual report for 2023-2024. They paid SA Taxi Council 2 million rand. Okay, so this is Northern Cape. The amount that was transferred, actual transfer to Northern Cape Taxi Council was 900,000. This is Mpumalanga. It says that it transferred 12 million rand to Taxi Association. It transferred a whole bunch of other money to a whole bunch of other bus services as well. So this is Limpopo. They transferred. Limpopo Taxi Council received 7 million rand. KZN sent to the SA National Taxi Council, transferred 12.5 million. Gauteng is a shocker. Non-profit institutions received 20 million from the Gauteng Road and Transport Department. Free State sent 5 million to the Free State Taxi Council. Eastern Cape sent the Provisional Department Agency Taxi Council 6.8 million rand, as well as 4.8 million rand, which was for Provincial Taxi Council, body that represents the taxi industry, and that was used for professionalization of the taxi industry. The Department of Transport, this is now our national department, says advance payments were made to the National Empowerment Fund to process COVID relief payments to registered taxi operators. So the payment was sent to the Empowerment Fund, which means that it's different to the payments made by the municipalities. An amount of 1.1 billion was made available for the relief payments, and an amount of 40 million was paid as a management fee. But it doesn't stop there. In addition to those payments, the Department of Transport paid the taxi industry 28.6 million rand, and for the taxi recapitalization project, a further 397 million rand. And I really want to put the nail in the coffin here. I am sorry that I'm going to do this. But if you ever wanted to see a complete waste of taxpayers' money, the National Department of Transport paid 9.5 million more due to an increase in broadcasting services. And I bet you that's for SABC, who is currently on the verge of liquidation. Infrastructure and Planning Services paid 38.4 million rand more for the oil pollution prevention in the 23-24 financial year. Travel and subsistence and venues and facilities increased by 58.6 million due to more traveling to the provinces and the finalization of travel agent invoices for the 22-23 financial year. It is very frustrating to see all these figures. Our hard-earned tax money being spent on a sector that doesn't contribute meaningfully to society as a whole. In fact, could we go as far as to say that The taxi industry could potentially be the government we don't see, that we don't hear about, the puppet masters pulling the strings. And until national government puts their foot down and holds their ground in a similar fashion to what happened in the Western Cape, we will continue to see and experience lawlessness and violence from this unregulated industry. Because unfortunately, in order to step up and implement the law, instead of creating new legislation, there are going to have to be major disruptions, major upheaval, and chaos, similar to what we saw in the Western Cape. And it is unfortunate because this is going to again affect the poor. But a leader who has a long-term vision for South Africa's success will stand firm, take the knock, buckle up, and get it over and done for the broader South Africa, not just the ANC corrupt elite. I call for taxi industry regulation. So thank you for watching. I hope this was insightful. I hope this gave you a bit of insight as to what isn't being covered by the media and the true cost of this unregulated industry that has been unregulated since 1987. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and share. Feel free to give me a super thanks. I, of course, would love the support. I love all the comments and engagement. Thank you so much. And welcome to all my new subscribers. And on this note, have a great day. Over and out.